program explores complex financial crimes and their global impact. The views expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the producers and/or the host. From boardroom decisions to shadow banking, from Wall Street to the dark corners of the internet, this is From the Hill to the Trenches, the search for justice. I'm your host, Dorothy Hill. As a former Goldman Sachs associate who has worked in 5 countries, including Germany and Japan, trained in compliance by a former agent of the FBI, and advised both global banks and government agencies, I've witnessed how money moves through legitimate channels and shadowy networks. In this podcast, we investigate the world of financial crime, otherwise known as fin crime, compliance, and the pursuit of justice. We talk to the insiders, the regulators, investigators, compliance officers, and occasionally the reformed criminals who understand how financial systems can be exploited and protected. From money laundering to sanctions evasion, cryptocurrency schemes to corporate fraud, we follow the money trail and examine the human impact of financial crime. Whether you're a finance professional, work in compliance or technology, or simply care about transparency and justice, join us as we navigate the complex intersection of money, power, and accountability. This is From the Hill to the Trenches, the search for justice. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 3 of Hill to the Trenches, the search for justice. Just a reminder for all the listeners who are on audio only across our various podcast platforms, the website where you can get more information is www.hill2trenches.com, and that's trenches plural. So today we are joined by our very esteemed guest, Lili Kazemi. She is based in
Washington.
Go ahead, Lili.
The heart of Washington, D.C.
Wonderful. So we are here on Long Island, New York, and it's a short distance from New York to D.C. Many of you who are listening have probably taken the Acela or the flight down and back. So we're really what we call East Coast neighbors, and there are many wonderful connections between New York and DC. Those of you who are listening from your job site, whether you work at a bank, a law firm, or even just listening in your car, this is the first person we've had featured as a guest from the East Coast. I originally met Lili via LinkedIn, and we ascertained that we have a lot in common. Work experience, working in the legal and financial services consulting field, and also our passion for physical fitness and living a healthy life. So I'll cede the floor to you, Lili. We'll go for about 30 minutes. And I'd like for you to just introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers. Thank you.
Absolutely. Dorothy, I am thrilled to be here. And my name is Lili Kazemi. And I don't even know where to begin, how to define who I am, because I've evolved so much over my career and my life. I basically would characterize myself as an entrepreneur and wellness advocate who has spent a lot of her life in the corporate world, in the law firm space, in the accounting firm space for a number of years. I'm now in-house at a tech company. Along the way, I realized I had a second calling, which is fitness. Now, in the beginning, I focused on myself and getting myself physically fit, because I reached a point in my life when I realized I wasn't prioritizing that. And in order to get the better life I wanted, that was the clear path I saw to it. So once I had that realization and went through all the steps that it entailed to get to the point where I felt I had achieved that goal, I then had a purpose to impart what I learned to other people, because another large area I focus on is knowledge management. And the main lesson of that is a piece of content is only as good as the people who get to see it. If an idea or something that it manifests just sits on a shelf and people don't see it, it's kind of like if the tree falls in the forest. Well, in this area, it does not make a sound. And so I wanted to make a sound and also in the market of the professional space, because obviously I'm not the first person to produce fitness content. If you go on TikTok, YouTube, podcasts, you name the platform, there's lots of fitness influencers. I mean, some of them have, and I admire them very much, like had, unbelievable success. And I actually am inspired. A lot of my content is inspired by that. But I felt that there wasn't a specific space and content curated for people like you, Dorothy, like some of the members of your audience, people who are perhaps, later in their careers, and they're basically just dealing with the hustle of everyday life, whether that be career, whether it be school, whether it be parenthood, whatever big thing you're tussling with in life, you really don't have time to wade through all the noise. And so my goal was to filter the content that would be the most appropriate for this audience, for people like us, and just give them a path to a healthier and happier life.
Right. I really like the fact that you mentioned noise, because when we think about our focus on our daily life, and let's just take Monday through Friday, we have a structured schedule. We combine our work with whatever physical activity we're engaged in. For example, I start my day on the Pilates reformer, whether it's a 6 a.m. class or 7:30. I do that before work. It energizes me. And I really feel a big change in both fitness and focus. I like that, F&F, fitness and focus. When I read your background, Lili, I thought, wow, this is fascinating. Here is a highly successful woman who has worked for PwC and other firms, obtained her JD degree. So that's a law degree for those of you who are listening outside of the United States. And she also has embarked on another path involving health and wellness, which is the DAO Fit, Dow Fit. You can see that in the background. So could you explain to us, Lili, how did you make that decision and when did you make it to transition to a new form of creation as an entrepreneur to then develop that into a business? So where and when did you do that?
I will say from the beginning, I did not do that all at once. It was very iterative. It actually started with back when I developed my overall purpose. I keep saying purpose. And why do I do that? Because I believe that's the most important thing, starting with why. The title of a very loved book by me, by Simon Sinek, saying start with why. And it is one of those books aimed at people that want to develop and execute big ideas, but a lot of them focus on the what and the how and the end results. And obviously he's a very well-known speaker and author, but that is one of his core principles, to first identify the why. So once I identified that, what is the next action step for me? So as someone who always loved writing, I've loved writing long before I wanted to be a lawyer. I was writing short stories in elementary and middle school. I was writing poetry. So writing just was something that I love to do. And that is one of the reasons that I did want to be a lawyer, because writing is such a huge part of that. So my next logical thought was, getting this content out there, I want to write a book. So I did that, and I started in 2018 just with a laptop and a blank screen, writing the book. By 2020, I had a working draft because, mind you, I'm doing this while operating at a very stressful but enjoying life level at a large company, traveling a lot, working a lot of hours. So this was something that I was able to fit in. And by the time I did have this working draft in 2020, as people who are authors know, or who write any sort of thing, the first draft is never the draft that gets published. It often that's rewritten and written again and again and again. So that process did go on. But in the meantime, again, back to what I just said earlier, content that just sits there on the shelf and isn't utilized is essentially a waste. So my husband is actually the CEO of a tech company, and he's always been a great partner to me in my career. And I don't know if a lot of people have read the book Lean In, but it is something that's still incorporated into the zeitgeist of how we best envision a woman succeeding, having a great partner. And that's what he's always been. So we sat down and brainstormed, how can I get this content out there, even though the book, and obviously hindsight's 2020, but if I had known, the book would be published for 3 more years. So we thought of a website. Obviously, coming from his background as an internet architect, that's the first thing he thought of. We developed the concept. And so thanks for plugging it. And you said it correctly. And we can leave the links in the show notes, etc. But it's Dow Fit Life. People ask me where I got that name. So Dow is both an acronym and it's a word. It is the Chinese word for the way. And it's an acronym because in corporate America, we always use acronyms for decision, action, and outlook. And my book outlines the steps of that because even before you get to the actions, you have to carefully define your purpose, make a decision, and then you take the action. But you also have to have the outlook that you're going to need to actually keep the motivation and keep it sustainable for a lifetime.
In your view, does that outlook ever shift? So I'll give you an example. I just returned from Nashville for the annual conference of Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. And those of you who are CFEs, Certified Fraud Examiners, you know well that there were sessions during the conference about focus on the stand. So there were FBI agents speaking about their work in the Madoff case and the type of training they underwent to testify under oath. All of us over the course of our career have something to learn. None of us are perfect. None of us are all knowing. Did that outlook when you started the company shift over time, and how so? And this is a zinger question. We didn't go through this before the recording.
Okay. Well, part of being a good lawyer is thinking on your feet. And I'd actually like to tie it to one of the questions I knew you were going to ask, which was, what is your advice to young attorneys at the beginning of their career? That's correct, right? Because I always like to bring things back to who is taking in this information and what purpose will it serve them. So what I will say about outlook, both in my career and in the decision to start Dow Fit Life and write a book, my outlook changed significantly. And I would say that the most significant way is that things did not evolve the way that I thought they were going to evolve. no matter how carefully I planned and orchestrated and mapped out, where I am today is nowhere where I thought I would be when I started law school, after I graduated, when I pursued my LLM in tax, and then did a clerkship, and then went to a law firm, and then went to an accounting firm. All of my outlook greatly changed over that period because I realized that there's really only areas that I can control. There's areas that I can influence. And then there's areas that are just circumstances I can't do anything about. And so my outlook changed this way. Instead of fighting against the grain of lack of control over situations, I began to embrace it. And the more I let go and just be open-minded to the endless possibility. I actually brought this up recently as I was talking to one of my friends who was thinking of changing jobs. I positively believe in the law of attraction. So the law of attraction, I wouldn't really say it's denominational because I'm religious, I'm spiritual too, but it's a principle that believing in endless possibilities keeps you from being attached to any particular results. And so if something doesn't work out the way you think it would have, or that you wanted it to, just know, even if you don't believe that that's what was supposed to happen or what the universe wanted to happen, if you just believe there are so many other possibilities that could happen, that just kind of takes the pressure off. Because it's still like, well, maybe this thing didn't turn out for the best, but I can still do all of these other things. And the same as it's outward, but it's also inward. So when I keep saying younger, but yes, I was younger. I used to really take it so hard when I got any criticism, constructive, which is good. I think that is good. And I think maybe we need to do that more, but that's a whole other podcast. Or when I made mistakes. I mean, honestly, Dorothy, do you remember a time in your career when you made a mistake and you thought, game over, it's the end of the world? Maybe you weren't that dramatic, but do you relate to any of that experience at all when you think back?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
I can recall something over the last 2 years where we were at 80-90% of closing a deal. And then I had to step back and ask, why didn't we close it faster? What are the repercussions? But it all worked out, and I have a positive relationship with all of these people. And then my life took a very positive turn in terms of my career, that is. So yes, absolutely. And I like what you said about just stepping back, keeping a positive attitude, and basically seeing, quote unquote, how the cookie crumbles. That was a plug of Lean In to actually Sheryl Sandberg, whom I had met at 2010.
Wow.
She's a wonderful person, and I highly recommend her book. But Lean In also can apply to any gender, not just, women. It does, however, drive home the point that we as women are our best personal promoters and cross promoting each other's businesses, dreams, and ideas. So when we tie it all back together, we're talking about outlook, being comfortable with the unknown.
Yes.
And then almost like a decision tree. So you're an attorney, I'm an MBA. I use decision trees all the time in my career and in my personal life. And it makes you that more strategic and tactical in terms of, like you said, not knowing how something may turn out, but being open to learning something new and, like you said, going down a completely different path.
Yeah, that absolutely resonates. So I think we all have experiences that we can relate to, or times where you might have looked back. And that's the thing I learned too, that feelings are not always facts. So I look back in situations, and you probably can relate, where my outlook on something or a situation or myself might have been a certain way, but that wasn't even reality. It's not delusion, but it is distorted. And that's why I really like meeting people like you, meeting people in the community, because outlook and perspective is something that we can all share with each other. And so I've learned, even in just the content that I communicate, I've learned so much from so many other people, or, people I meet on social media, or friends that I have, who say, well, I read what you read about this, or did you know about that? Or I've done this. This really works for me. So I learn a lot from them as well. And being open to receive that, and constantly just asking the questions. I've always, maybe it's because I'm an only child, but I've always been really inquisitive. So even on this podcast, it's like, I want to be the one asking questions, but I'll answer, I promise. But basically, why am I like that? I don't know. I'm curious about that too, but I just always been that way. But I think that the healthy curiosity really also just helps you sometimes dispel notions you may have that can be holding you back. You may feel like, well, I can never make this change in my career, or I don't think I'll ever be able to get into the shape I want. But it's like, but why? Why do you think that way? Do you have any evidence that this is true? Or does the situation really matter? And sometimes when you do that, and then you're answering that question yourself, kind of realize, no, maybe this is possible. And maybe it doesn't really matter.
We have agreed on this podcast that we will address issues like that, as well as financial crimes, corruption, and fraud. So when someone wants to make a change in their life and they have certain thoughts or ideas that they believe will prevent them from attaining that idea, often they just have to step back and ask themselves. So get rid of all the cognitive dissonance, and in some cases bring in a third party like yourself, and also be open to change. So constructive criticism is a great thing. I remember working at McKinsey in Berlin, and the partner, Aberhard, pulled me into his office, and we had a performance review. And I said, thank you. Do you have anything else that I can improve upon? And I remember him saying to me in German, that's just amazing, because most people don't react that way. They're defensive, angry, accusative. And I thought, well, I want to be a great consultant. So please just keep the feedback coming. And that's one of the most important aspects of becoming a better person, colleague, friend, or even member of your own family. Like you said, that continuous change. So I love the idea of what you and your husband have built. And I wanted to ask you the next question, which is managing your legal career as well as your company. So we had agreed the proper term is not juggling. It's really how you prioritize your time. So could you share with our listeners, how do you do that effectively?
Yeah, and this can apply to anything that you want to do outside your career, or anytime you want to have more than one passion, side project, side hustle. Obviously, you have to manage your time very well. So I'm a big planner, but managing time is more than about a calendar and what's in it, or what's in your inbox. The way I manage my time effectively is by identifying, for example, on a day-by-day basis, what is the one thing that has to get done today that's going to change the way everything else is going to play out for the better. I identify the one thing, and then I don't do anything else or let anything else disturb me until that's done. And I apply the same piece of intentionality to anything I'm doing. So I think something that a lot of us struggle with, because it's very tempting, for example, to do, is to multitask. I've learned, however, that multitasking is basically doing a lot of things at once and getting nothing done. So I'm not interested in it anymore. So that's one of the ways, time management, but also actually activating the passion I have for each of them to motivate me to keep going and taking opportunities to cross it over. For example, a lot of the content I'm working on is actually going to be an overlap between fitness and technology. There's a lot of use for AI in fitness now. There's a lot. I even have an AI chatbot on my website. So basically it takes all of the content that I have created over the 5 years, my book. You can ask it any question you want, and it will give you, based on the retrievable augmented data we have, it will give you all of the responses on basically any question you would ask based on what's there. So there's a lot of ways that you can tie things together. And then the last thing I will say, besides time management, is habits are really key for me. So one of my favorite books is called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm actually about to write a recap of his book, and there's a similar book by BJ Foggs, but I actually like James Clear's version of Habits better. But basically the theme there is, in order to change your life, you can't do it in an instant. It is one action at a time. It's one habit at a time. The problem is it is very hard to build a new habit. It is also difficult to let go of old habits, which is what people usually focus on. But his premise is, if you build enough new habits, they will naturally displace the old ones. In order to make a habit stick, however, you have his content, his book talks about, you have to make it obvious, you have to make it attractive, and you have to make it satisfying. So one example of obvious, if you want to start incorporating maybe meditation or doing some quick stretching when you wake up in the morning, keep your yoga mat close to where you would drink your morning coffee. Tie it to an existing prompt or habit. Another way of making it easy is, if you want to go to the gym in the morning, if you want to go to your Pilates reformer class, and by the way, hats off to you for doing that at 6 a.m. That's hardcore. I mean, I admire that. But what if I were to suddenly say, well, I really want to try to just work out that early in the morning. That's a habit I'll have to adapt. And lying my clothes out, my workout clothes, I like to call it fireman style, on the floor, including with the shoes. So you just get up and like, like, make it easy. There's so many ways. And I say this in my book, but look, a lot of people watching this podcast are likely highly educated, have gone to school for years and years and years, gotten advanced degrees, done jobs that only extremely smart people will be able to do. So we're all smart enough to figure this out. And I don't want to say game the system on a financial fraud themed webcast, but really there's nothing wrong with it. Just find ways to incorporate these daily habits and small changes. And over time, they add to a big change. But that is also the third, or the fourth, depending on where we are. thing that I would add to how do you juggle, you have to be patient. This is not going to all get figured out right away. There's going to be a lot of trial and error. I mean, I can give you a big example of that. In my journey toward wellness, I tried a lot of diets. I don't know about you, Dorothy, but I, went on the Atkins plan. I wanted to be, I was keto, I was paleo. I remember even from being younger, we all said, no, fat isn't, you have to cut fat out of everything. But what I learned in this process is that diets do not work. They are not sustainable. And that was one of my greatest inspirations for my content. I actually have summaries of every single diet you could possibly try, what they require. But then I also explain to everyone, why did I break up with this diet? Because that's the important thing for people to know. And why was it not sustainable? So building sustainable habits after recognizing through trial and error what does not work is the best way that people can learn to juggle, to synergize, to basically be everywhere all at once, it seems.
I love that. So some of the key themes are breaking up with bad habits, being prepared if you have to do something early in the morning. Your firefighter ready example made me laugh because we have a rescue dog from Tennessee. And if I did that, one of my Pilates socks would probably go missing.
Oh,
so
well, see, you got it. Do you have a wall you can hang it on? Because I actually have these cabinets with like little hooks, and I have a dog as well, but she knows better than to mess with my clothes. But yeah, like I have these little like hooks, so I actually like hanging it up. So that was more metaphorical.
Right. Okay.
Wherever you have to lie it out of the reach of kids and dogs is,
Exactly.
So I'll come over to your house and figure it out for you.
Yes. And I'm a Virgo, so I like things organized. I always joke with my children, if you ask me for something, even a file, I know exactly where it is. So you never have to wait. But that could be good and bad. In terms of like breaking up with those bad habits, for me, it was just practical. There were days because of my work schedule, I had to take the 6 a.m. class. Now it's a little bit later, and then I've got to switch back to those early classes. But like I said, I could see the result. I felt so good even after the most difficult, challenging was. And a shout out to my Pilates instructor, Melissa. Because when I first took a class with her, I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to make it through this 1.5 level. And I'm now moving on to 2.0 level. For those of you who know Pilates, it's such a great feeling of accomplishment to see something and watch someone do something, say, I can't do that, and then be able to do it once you apply, mind over matter. If we switch back to your tax career, what were some of the tips that you implemented? So tips from other people that allowed you to be more successful as a tax professional, as an attorney, and just generally in life. What other life lessons can you convey to the audience?
So I think a lot of what I said earlier equally applies here, but just to incorporate some new tips for everyone, especially in the tax career context. I think a few of the things that were key to my success was, one is I had excellent mentors. And I say that plurally because for every I would say my career, a lot of it was in like 2 to 3 year increments, because this is the way, everyone might remember there were specific blocks of time, like in those increments, where there were maybe 1 or 2 mentors I had that actively mentored me during that time, whether they were lawyers at the law firm I worked at or some other person I had met in the industry. Their input was critical to me at that time. and then you move on, like you change your job, or you just change like the people you're not working with, or you just stumble across someone else. And it would almost be, I almost feel like it's fate that I can probably rattle off a list of, 20 people, both men and women, both much older or like around my age. It doesn't even matter. I learned from people who are younger than me as well, but who have just had a significant influence in my career. And so that's critical, I would say, to success. And I think that does demand somewhat of an entrepreneurial spirit, because I know, for example, you may go to, especially for a large company, large firms, they sometimes assign, a partner or mentor in some capacity, and that's great. But I found the people who were my best mentors, that wasn't necessarily an arrangement beforehand. And that leads me to my second key, I think, in success is good networking. And as we know, there's definitely great ways to do it. It sounds like you do a mix of in-person, but you're also, very active on LinkedIn. And those are both ways I think are great. Showing up in person in whatever way, the finance world has its own circles and events. The tax world, we have a lot of conferences, but we also have very small sub communities surrounded, in areas of expertise, as I'm sure you do. You've got like money laundering, but there's also different areas you can focus on. So for me, my focus in tax has been for years, transfer pricing. Do you want me to quickly define the term? Like the 5-second version?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, transfer pricing is really cool. I mean, I just love it because it involves allocating global profit of multinational companies to the right entities and jurisdictions for tax purposes. When you think about it, all of these, multinational corporation, all of its entities are transferring goods, services, and intangible property between each other in some way, however they're related. So in transfer pricing, in most lexicons of law, you have to act as if the parties are unrelated and operating at arm's length, and then you price the transactions accordingly. So it's a blend of economics, law, and business. And one of the best things I loved about it was I got to know a lot of industries and businesses very well. And so in that area, I worked with some incredibly seasoned, specialized experts, and I sought out their mentorship as well. And I think that's a really important thing to do. Seek it out, whether it's going up to someone, asking to take them to coffee, even on LinkedIn, like people reach out and they're like, hey, can we like get on a call? Let's get to know each other. Great. Find some opportunity to work with them, like collaborating on an article. Do something so you're in a structure with this person. And how do you find them? Like, it's someone that you strive to be. It's someone that you admire. That's always what's been drawn to me. And also having a lasting relationship. I mean, I'm in touch with all of these people. Every time a lot of times we don't live in the same place. And so whenever one of them's in DC, they're like, let's grab breakfast, let's grab coffee. If I'm in New York, I know I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And so it's been these lasting relationships that have really just centered me, provided a lot of lessons that you can't learn from school or books or on your own, and really shaped who I am today in my career.
Absolutely. I love that idea. My daughter, I'm very proud of her. She works for a startup in Chicago, and I encouraged her, because her background in education is really highly technical, data science and statistics. Therefore, I encourage her to go meet with the head of marketing, go speak with the person in HR who's responsible for training, talk to the people in accounts payable and accounts receivable, learn how the business is run, and then she could decide, where she wants to go to graduate school, where, and, in which degree. So that's a great idea, that cross-fertilization of ideas. I especially like your example of getting to know someone and then writing a white paper together or working on a research project, a passion project. For example, I met Veronica Summers through C Vision, which is a global conference company, that is. And we became friends because we both have an interest in eradicating human trafficking. And then she taught me about like sextortion of teenagers. I didn't know much about it. So I've learned so much through her, and we'll hopefully have her on a future podcast. That is a great idea. And what I'd like to do, Lili, is the next time you're in New York, I'll invite you to have breakfast at Pershing Square, which is a great restaurant just across from Grand Central. We can continue the discussion. We can also figure out which other topics are of interest to our listeners. So I thank you again for your time, your amazing insights and knowledge that you've shared with us. And I'd like to end it, if you don't mind, by your asking me a question.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for your breakfast invitation. I'm super excited about that. And that gives me a reason to visit New York sooner rather than later. I would just ask you, what would you say for yourself are the top 3 things that you have learned are the key to success in your career?
Number 1 is to garner the skills and knowledge to become an expert in a particular area, whether it's technology, the law, financial technology transformation, cybersecurity, protection of children, etc. Number 2 is be very strategic about the people with whom you associate. Number 3 is just try to make the most of every day. Like you said, have one thing that you absolutely must get done that day that will result in positive downstream effects. So knowledge. Number 2, your network, the people you associate with. And number 3, being strategic and tactical in terms of your own goals.
I really did enjoy being on here. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who listened. And I would encourage anyone who's interested to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to find me. So I'll look forward to hearing from you.
Wonderful. And thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
You've been listening to From the Hill to the Trenches, The Search for Justice. I'm Dorothy Hill. Financial crime, or fin crime, may seem distant and abstract, but its effects touch all of us through market instability, compromised institutions, and eroded trust in our financial systems. If today's discussion has sparked your interest, there are ways to stay engaged. Visit our website, www.hill2trenches.com. That's number 2, hill2trenches.com, where you will find resources, extended interviews, and case studies mentioned in this episode. Follow us on social media at Hill Trenches, that's trenches plural, at Hill Trenches, for daily insights and breaking news in the world of financial integrity. Most importantly, share what you've learned. Greater awareness is the first step toward a more transparent financial system that works for everyone, not just for those who know how to exploit it. Until next time, remember, following the money reveals the truth, and truth is the foundation of justice. Join us again next week as we continue our search for justice in the complex world of global finance.